Hey, Susan,
Gosh.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, cool. Sound check complete.
Yep. Obligatory sound check.
Okay, I'm trying to see where is my participant list. Okay, let me share my screen and then I can drag my windows around. So sharing the Chrome process. Then window. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thanks for confirming. Just waiting a couple of minutes for everyone to join. I'm going to read this message. Link underlines. By default, links in text blocks on GitHub will now be underlined. Links in text block will be underlined. Okay. Cool. We have Junchen, Binbin, and Akash. Let's quickly go through our PR list. First one, 1122, adding missing quote for Azure Identity Client ID. Akash, I see you've left a comment on what is the user scenario, since at runtime they will be overridden.
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly what is the configuration that they're using where this actually fixed any problem that they found because I don't see how updating the config map would affect the error that they're saying. So
Interesting. Is this a new user or this name somehow seems familiar? Do we know
I
what's
think
his
this
name?
is a new user,
New
maybe?
user?
Yeah.
Oh, looks like he's based in France. Very cool. Yeah, we also do have an issue tracking removal of the config map. I think that's currently assigned to Junchang. So Akash, let us know how the conversation goes, because removing of the verifiers and stores and would potentially impact this, like whatever scenario he have in mind if he's fiddling with the config map.
Yeah, I just waiting for a response from this user, and then I can schedule a call or help debug further on this thread. But it's been a few days, no response yet. So
Okay. Yeah, thank you for responding to this PR. Next one, add vulnerability scanner prototype. So this one is still in draft. Kash, do you have any questions for E, or is there anything you want to discuss?
no, not at this point. It's very initial. It's just to give some, I guess, color to some of the requirements and scenarios we're targeting. So I know Yi's still working on some documentation and kind of have a experience laid out. So whenever he's ready to discuss, we can do more of that. So
Okay, cool. And E, once you have the experience in the scenarios for the vulnerability report and the SBOM validation, are we tracking those in the Ratify repository, and how would they be tracked? Like, would it be in the design doc, or what would be the formal document?
What is the current way for that? I can, for example, I created the issue or some issue related were created by some other folks. I can update the scenarios experience in the issue, or I can also create a document, put somewhere in the Ratify repository. It's both okay for me. I think the information is the content is the same, just the format.
Yeah, it's also for discoverability. Like if later on someone is looking at the verifier and wondering like what's the design and the goals behind the validation, like is it more discoverable in the issue or more discoverable as like a specification in some folder?
I remember previously we seems discussed about this, right? We have some design, and for example, Akash have some design for the HA support, right?
Yeah.
Did we put those Markdown format into the code repo?
No,
Code repository?
those haven't been done yet. I think we definitely need to do that. So right now, I think primarily we just create new HackMD documents and then use those and then link that in an issue. Maybe that's probably the best way forward for consistency's sake. Although the issue route is also fine by me. So whatever you feel you want to do here.
Earlier, Fame was
Because
suggesting adding a spec folder under the root, right?
yeah, I remember we discussed about this, right? Louis didn't join today. I remember we discussed about this, maybe a photo on the docs or maybe a photo under the root. For the yeah, please, Akash.
No, I think that makes sense. But whatever document we do add there still has to be likely a kind of like a link section to the HackMD documents, because if we don't use the HackMD documents, we're going to lose all of our comments and all of the edits, the suggestions that were given when people reviewed things. So that's why like Gatekeeper also has a similar way of doing it. They use Google Docs instead. So they just link the Google Doc in like a design URL file. So I think we should probably do the same thing just to preserve the comment capabilities, because otherwise commenting on GitHub using like Markdown is very confusing. You have to kind of switch between the preview as well as the raw version, and it's not a suitable experience. So
I think my only concern there, and maybe it's not a concern, Cash, but your HackMD, like a lot of these documents, for instance, leaving your personal HackMD account, correct?
yes, yeah. So that I think we could probably migrate to, like, if we have some central account or something.
Yeah. So if we are planning on linking, I feel like we should migrate all of this into a place that's not personal accounts. So perhaps like there's like a team HackMD account. Maybe something we can follow up offline, Susan.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
next.
yeah, because yeah, sorry, just because at some point, like I don't know, like if somebody contributes on their personal accounts and they close their account, like those links will be forever gone.
Yeah. We'll also have a look at what does Gatekeeper have. Like, do they have a project account, or how do they manage their Google document?
Yep.
Why need a central account or the project account for HackMD?
Yep.
Actually, I think HackMD is designed for personal use, since it doesn't have a very good list for archiving all of those docs, and show those docs in a central place. I mean, if
So
we want
potentially we
to,
might need to move to Google Docs.
you mean those prototype designing docs?
Yeah,
So
I think
the-
my only concern is if we lose the comments that or any of the suggestions that were added on the side of the document.
Okay, so I got your point. So actually, I have seen a lot of projects has a dedicated repository or folder like proposal or prototype or spec, which is used to gather all of those proposals, design doc, and spec related docs in a central place. So people just raise PRs to that repo or that folder. So we can gather any comments and feedback and archive all of those docs in a central place. So I'm thinking maybe we can create a folder in Ratify code repo or just create a dedicated repo for that and archive all of those historical prototype docs for this intention. Instead of putting those docs in a project account, whatever Google Docs or HackMD.
Yeah, so I think we can have a process going forward, and we can also think about how to save the existing docs. And the existing HackMD docs, if we want to preserve the comment, it may be difficult, but going forward, maybe we can start like a design folder under the Ratify repository, and then comments can be captured in a PR. Is that what you're proposing, Feynman?
Yeah, correct. And actually, I can share an example that Kyverno community is currently following. They have a Kyverno design proposal repository.
Okay.
And the similar things, the similar norms followed by other communities like Istio and Kubernetes, they have their dedicated community repo to archive all of those design docs. I'm thinking we can have the similar things since all of those docs are tracked in Git and GitHub. So we will not lose anything.
Yeah, sounds good. We can look into that. And E, I guess your specification for the vulnerability scanner and SBOM verifier would be our first candidate for moving to this new workflow. So we can discuss offline as well on which is the best convention to follow. And Shuwei just gave a suggestion to explore if HackMD docs can be exported as PDF. So I don't know, Akash, if you have looked into that option. Does it have an export function?
Nope, not sure. I can take a look into it. That would be ideal. Then we can just archive that.
Yeah. Cool. Next PR 1133, Binbin, I know you have the CRT agenda on the call today, so we'll discuss this one later.
Yes, if PR is too big, I think I will just share some findings on the CRT convention webhook. Yeah,
sounds good. And 1134, I just created this one. This one sets the default certificate store namespace. So I've listed out the the major business logic updates in this list. So it's in a ready to review state. So Binbin, Akash, once you have time, please do an initial pass. And I also, because the change is quite big, I'm also planning to run it through on the Monday meeting. But feel free to review the changes before the meeting. But we'll go through it again next Monday, Tuesday Shanghai time with the PR meeting. Cool. So that's everything on our PR. Moving to the agenda. We've been delaying this for a few weeks now, and given Feynman and E only have 15 minutes left. Akash, do you want to start on the preferred?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm not going to go through all of it. If you it's now on the website, so if people are interested, you can just read through it, but I'll focus on like the main findings from it. So Susan, if you could just make me co-host, I'll share my screen.
Yep. Okay, just trying to find the right button. Make host. Do you want to change the host to Akash? Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pick and choose from this document here, but you can find it at the Ratify dev, and then under reference, you'll find the performance at scale document here. So, so basically, quick overview. This is a performance test framework as well as implementation and a first round test, which was conducted prior to our V1 release last month. This was an attempt to provide a more comprehensive view of Ratify's performance capabilities running at different configurations with different workload types, different registry configurations, as well as at different scales, so all the way up to 10,000 pod cluster sizes. So some more details for testing here. We focused mainly on the Kubernetes cluster inside of an AKS cluster. We used Gatekeeper with Ratify's external data provider, and then we tested multiple different types of deployments as well as jobs with multiple types of containers in each of those resources. And then we measured different measurements to determine things like resource consumption, CPU usage, registry 429s, and a few other things, which I'll go into next. So in terms of the test itself, some of the main variables that we were fiddling with were, one was the cluster size. So what is the node count of the AKS cluster that we'll be testing Ratify inside of? And this is related to the size of your workloads that you'll be putting into the cluster. So we started all the way down at 200 pod clusters, which correspond to 11 nodes, all the way up to 10,000 pod clusters, which are about 307 nodes. And then this is the VM type that I also used in the AKS cluster. The other main important variable was the registry's region size. So ACR has different region sizes you can think of. These aren't documented publicly, but there are limitations on ACR according to the underlying compute capacity that are serving each region. So you have large regions like East US2, you have medium, small, and then extra small regions. And depending on the size of the ACR region, so the size your ACR is in, that's going to determine things like how many requests per second can that particular registry handle, because that's directly related to the amount of compute available in that region. So for our test, we used 4 different regions, so 4 different ACRs, each in one of these regions. And they were picked by size as well as the proximity to the actual AKS cluster region, which was East US2 in our case. And this was to kind of minimize the cross-region latency. There definitely is cross-region latency nonetheless, but hopefully minimized or standardized across these regions. The other one that was other variable was the workload resource type. So either a deployment resource or a job workload. And that was because one of the hypotheses was that if you have a job resource, depending on how you set it up, the scheduling on the cluster is different compared to deployment. So for Ratify's sake, the number of requests that concurrently are hit that it consumes are related to how the Kubernetes scheduler schedules those resources. So that's why there's the difference in workload resource type. We also wanted to see the efficacy of the distributed cache that was recently added under the experimental flag. So most of the testing enabled Dapper plus Redis, along with 3 Ratify replicas for the optimal performance configuration. And this was to test if on the high end for large workloads, would we see better performance. And then finally, I also wanted to test what would be the difference or the limit that a single Ratify pod could handle before it kind of got overwhelmed and we would have to consider scaling out. That was also a good exercise to see what is the limit that we can support currently with our quick start scenario. So based off of those variables, some of the key measurements that were taken were the number of 429 responses from the registry, the Ratify CPU and memory usage, the max verification request duration. And so this one is helpful to understand when you have nothing cached inside of Ratify and it's a cold cache completely, how long is that initial request going to take? And then also the P95 request duration throughout the verification interval that the resources were loaded onto the cluster. So to understand like what is the P95 for that. Similarly, same two measurements for mutation as well as the mutation request duration. And then also looking at the number of Ratify container restarts, which is an indication of resource exhaustion, as well as some blocking errors at scale. And then finally looking at if the Ratify pod was out of memory killed by Kubernetes, and that will obviously signal that the service has terminated due to memory overexhaustion. So you can find the actual data of each of these of the different experiments that were made in this data matrix here. I'm not going to go over it today, but I will highlight a few important data points as I explain kind of the findings here. So given this was the testing that was done, the basic flow of the test was you create a cluster with a specified node count, you configure the AKS cluster with the RBAC, you configure the Ratify identities and the key vault to be able to pull the certificates and the images, you install Gatekeeper, install Ratify, you install Prometheus, and then you generate a set of workload resource templates depending on your test configuration. And that will also align with the resources that you've auto-generated inside of your registry as well. So if I've got 10 containers with 5 signatures attached to them, then I need some auto-generation tool to actually populate that registry with the corresponding configuration, as well as generate the workload resource templates that correspond to that. So that's what this step is doing here. And then you want to, before you begin the actual test, you want to start measuring what are the baseline resource usages in the cluster. So what is the Ratify minimum CPU? What is the Ratify minimum memory usage? And then kind of plot that throughout the duration of the test. And then you apply your workloads. And then finally use Prometheus to actually scrape those measurements that we were discussing before. And then upload the logs for Gatekeeper and Ratify as well. So that was kind of the major flow of what was going on for the test. And again, you can find the exact implementation details all the way down here. If you scroll down, this is the actual pipeline implementation here. Okay, so now to the actual important part. So what did we find here? So at a high level, the current supported limits for a single Ratify pod is that it can support verification requests for up to 1,000 pod clusters. And the test focused on about 50 supply chain artifacts being verified. So for each pod that you deployed, you would have 50 supply chain, for each image that, for each pod that you deployed, you'd have 50 supply chain artifacts that were being verified. So a single request to Ratify would be 50 supply chain artifacts being verified. Within each pod, there were 10 images, and then each image was 5 signatures. And if you have the HA-enabled Ratify pod with 3 replicas, you can actually support verification requests all the way up to 10,000 pod clusters. And a cool data point there is if we take a look at the actual data here, in the largest region, which is East US 2, with the largest cluster size, so we have 10,000 pod workload size, we can see that we have 0 429s, which means the registry is performing very well, and we have almost no Ratify timeouts. So it's like a greater than 99.9% success rate. So in the optimal performance, Ratify can support a 10,000 pod cluster, which is cool to confirm that finally. One caveat here is that I am still testing even larger clusters, so a 20,000 pod cluster, running into some scale issues with the actual test infrastructure. So currently I don't have any data to share there, but sometime in the future, we will update this chart to include that as well. Okay, so the biggest finding that we had in this test is the importance of the ACR region itself. So we all kind of had this idea that, okay, the size of the region is going to be important, but this test kind of confirms that it is very important, and actually it is quite detrimental to the performance of Ratify if you don't use a region which is large enough and you have too large of a cluster. So a few data points there that confirm that were, one, that if you have a cluster larger than about 200 pods, then you really should be using a medium or larger ACR region. Otherwise, you're going to start to see a increase in the number of 429s. And with 429, unfortunately, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling cycle, because once you start getting 429s, it affects clusters in two ways. So one is obviously Ratify is going to get affected because it's making multiple concurrent responses, and then you might hit throttling due to less pooled compute for that region. But also it affects the actual nodes that are trying to spin up and pull those images locally. And that also can affect the 429 rate, because that's also under the same IP and will be throttled in the same way as Ratify is being throttled. So if you have a small region, you're going to face pressure on both ends, both from the Ratify requests as well as from the Kubernetes pulling requests, which makes things tougher. And if Ratify starts to get 429s and it's not able to complete within the duration or the retry interval, then it blocks the request, and then Helm and Kubernetes will try to recreate the resource, which means you'll have even more requests coming to Ratify. And then that can cause kind of a vicious cycle there, which definitely degrades the performance all throughout. Coming back up here, when you do have degraded performance, the main indication of that is actually the memory consumption for Ratify. So currently our chart sets the limit for Ratify pod to be 512 megabytes. And in, for example, the single instance Ratify pod scenario, we start to see that if you have too many requests and it's too resource intensive, the pod will eventually be out of memory killed. So the memory usage is a good indicator for maybe even scale out things. So we could even consider potentially providing like a horizontal pod autoscaler based off of the memory usage of the Ratify pod. That's a good indication of how many replicas you need. In terms of the workload resource type, deployment versus job, surprisingly, we didn't actually see much of a huge difference. The jobs definitely were more intensive than deployments, primarily because the way jobs are deployed, the parallelism is a lot more aggressive than deployments, which are chunked in batches. So that's why with jobs, we did see a higher RPS, but the Ratify request durations, resource consumptions were a little bit higher, but not substantially higher, which I was expecting. We talked about this. So memory usage is directly correlated to the number of resources on the cluster. So if you have too many resources that you're trying to verify at the same time, you're going to spike the memory usage and then potentially get out of memory killed on the Ratify pod. The CPU usage, on the other hand, was fairly minimal. It did increase linearly, but it wasn't like it wasn't beyond the limits that we've currently set on Ratify. In fact, we could probably even lower those limits a little bit and we would be still okay. And then finally, one of the most interesting findings was currently the performance benefit of the distributed cache for HA scenarios is in its current form without considering external plugins, which would definitely require this. it's a little bit inconclusive. And that's because in very large cluster scenarios, I was getting some very anomalous results in terms of the number of failed requests. It didn't match up with what I was expecting. So there is, in the logs, I can see that there is some sort of bottleneck that occurs where the request processing slows down a lot to the point where almost all requests come in are getting blocked. So there's some sort of bottleneck that I'm still trying to figure out. Initial investigation is pointing to a lock contention issue that we have with our HTTP request cache. Due to the nature of now we have a distributed cache, even lookups where we lock the entire request cache, or we would lock that particular request cache entry, it may take 1 or 2 milliseconds to read, but when we have so many requests and each of them are trying to verify the exact same image, the locking contention can stack up and we start to see that the lock is acquired for longer and longer periods of time, causing issues there. So that's my preliminary investigation, still trying to figure out exactly how to diagnose this issue. Unfortunately, it's quite difficult to reproduce this issue because at lower scales, we don't see this issue. It's only at very, very high scale, so 10,000 pods plus, that it becomes a problem. So that's kind of one work item this testing revealed. The other one, in terms of what's left for HA, I personally believe that after seeing the results from, especially from the large cluster and it being able to perform well, maybe we can put a pin on the OCI blob store support with PVC, especially since that was supposed to help alleviate any extra 429s from downloading blobs concurrently or the same blob on each of the different Ratify replicas. We may not need that immediately. Maybe in the future it will become more of an issue, but I think for now, maybe we're okay with just the way we have things set up. So yeah, I know spewing a lot of information, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. Any questions or clarifications?
This is fantastic. I need to drop, but I just wanted to say this is really cool. The only thing is the last bullet point seems like the distributed cache is not useful, whereas it is. Maybe rewording that might help.
Yes, yeah, I can reword that. There's a lot of like stars with this statement. I'll clear this up, but
okay.
In the testing that we've done so far, it's not conclusive whether it's much better, but we also haven't tested in the external plugin scenario where it's going to become imperative, especially when we have separate processes that can't share the in-memory cache, that like with cosine or SBOMs or things like that. Then I think it's going to become a lot more clear. But yeah, I'll update the phrasing here to make it more clear.
Thanks.
Yeah.
This is great content, Akash. Feynman just had a previous question, like just to confirm that different registries will see different performance, and Sajay was able to answer that in the chat. Reading the chat, I don't think there's any other question.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see the chat. I will go back through and see if I can answer anything more. Yep.
Yeah, and it looks like a few people have to drop. They might be headed to the same meeting.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Akash.
Thank you. I'll stop
And
sharing.
it's already been checked in, right? Yeah, it's already live on the talk.
Yeah, I'll make some edits according to what we discussed today, but apart from that, yeah, it's checked in.
Yeah, I wonder if we get any telemetry from the website, like how many times the page has been visited, and yeah, but not sure. I can follow up with Feynman later on this.
I do have a question, Akash. How yeah, and how easy would it be to reproduce the tests, like say for each May release we do?
So
Is it-
we can do a subset of these tests. Unfortunately, like to give you a sense, let me reshare my screen. 1 second. So to give you a sense, if you look at each one of these lines is an individual run.
Mhm.
So if we have to do all of them, each run takes about 2 hours. And unfortunately, if you're targeting the same registry, you cannot do them concurrently. So it's not, we could do like a meta automation where we can automate a pipeline of these runs, but it will take, it's not trivial to run all of these tests at once. So
Got it.
Yeah.
So it'll be a combination of like manual intent with some automated scripts, and potentially will take about a couple weeks because of running concurrency, right?
yes, yeah. So if we have like a major release or we are making changes which we feel are definitely going to affect these numbers, then we could definitely queue it up. It's not a run it and forget about it, unfortunately, especially with extracting some of this data. It's not
Right.
It's not automated. So
No, I think this sets a very nice baseline tool, right? So kind of as we do performance improvements in the future, or if we if we continue investing on HA, or if at some point we decide to actually we do need the persistent volume caching as well, like this will give us a clear sort of like baseline test to what to compare it to us if we need to. But I kind of I was interested to know how reproducible these tests were. It does seem like it would be like this would like it would be about 2-3 weeks of work.
yeah, it would be a little bit longer. If people are curious, this is actually how the pipeline works. You specify a bunch of different variables depending on what you're changing in the test, and then to grab the metrics, it sends curl requests to the Prometheus endpoint. So in order to scrape these metrics, you have to actually manually go through parse each one of these right now. I haven't automated this yet. So that's actually where the time consuming part is. So definitely improvements can be made to make this better, but yeah.
Gotcha. No, this is incredible work. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you all for your feedback. I think that's it from my side, Susan.
Thank you, Akash. I think the next agenda on the item was the CRD conversion. So Binbin, do you want to share screen?
Yeah, actually, I think I don't need to go through the PI. I just want to share some findings and yeah. So basically, I did some investigation and I tried to follow the Code Builder book to like set up the webhook. So basically, I found something interesting, and one is that for the metadata name and metadata namespace of the CR object, we cannot modify it in the webhook. So actually, for my policy CR, I need to do some like update to the metadata name, so which is not allowed. That means say from V1 alpha 1 to V1 beta 1, it will be some like a breaking change. And then also to make this conventional webhook work, we need to install a certain manager, which will like inject some CA bundles, and it will also generate some TLS certs for the webhook. And that's the main concern for me, because if we want to use the like CRD conventional webhook, we will add another dependency to the system. And also for the CRD, because previously we just use the base CRD, and now we need to do some like customization on those resources. And for CRD, we need to do some patch update, which one is about the third manager, one is about the webhooks configuration, and both of them require to add some namespace labels. And in this case, we have to like add a gatekeeper system namespace, which is hard coded to the like definition. And but if in the future, if we want to like install Ratify in different namespace, then we have to like replace those values because the CRDs are not templated, so we cannot just use some like variable to replace it in the CRD definition. And so that's most of the findings I found. And I just wonder if we really want to do the conversion web for now, because firstly, we need to have the third manager dependency. And second, we may need a lot of changes to the current code base. It's not brilliant change, but it requires a lot of changes in our Helm chart. And also we need to do some hard coding stuff in the CRD definition. And also I tried to reach out to Gatekeeper. Actually, yeah, I tried to reach out to Celtec in the Ratify channel, but I haven't get the feedback yet. And because the Gatekeeper also, they don't have the CRD conversion webhook. And also I checked some CRDs they have created. Looks like there is no difference between like V1 Alpha 1, V1 Beta 1, and V1. So I don't know how they handle this case. I'm just thinking if we should follow the same way as Gatekeeper. Yeah, that's all.
Thanks for the findings, Bin. I'm a bit surprised that we'll need to hard code a namespace into the CRD.
Yeah,
so
because
if customer installs Ratify and they also need to do the conversion, they'll have to change the deployment template.
Right. Yeah. Let me check if I can share it. Yeah, maybe I can share my screen. it will be, yeah.
There
Thank
you
you.
go.
Let me check. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Is it on the PR website? I don't know if. Okay.
It is.
Yeah. So this is the certificate of definition. So basically, we need to add one like third manager inject CF from annotation, and also we need to add a webhook configuration on the spec. And actually, those are generated by the customization. So this is not like manual change. It's auto-generated. So I cannot just update it manually. And also basically it requires us to have a namespace, which is the gatekeeper system in this case. And we cannot use it, we cannot replace it with some placeholder like values like namespace, because this is under CRDs and it cannot be templated as which is designed by Helm.
I see. And this is the way the QBuilder book guides as well.
Yeah, so actually the QBuilder guide is not related to the Helm. So they just use the main.go. So every time we make any change. We just run the customization command and do the deployment. But in our case, we need to build the Helm chart, so which requires another step, and it cannot be fully supported.
Interesting. Cool. My vote would be that we've done the investigation of what it requires to do custom conversion. And at the moment, our previous version bump was from alpha to beta, right?
Right.
And there's no guarantee. Like, I think it's reasonable to have the customer do a manual conversion.
Yeah, so actually I did test on the full CRDs. And so for the store verify and third store. So actually if we don't specify the conversion webhook, it still works, even with the Viva Alpha 1 and Viva Beta 1, because there is no like breaking change. But for the policy CR, I think even I specify the CRD conversion webhook, it still not work. The reason is that we need to update the metadata name, but which is not allowed by the
Yeah.
So
lesson learned. Do not. It makes sense from a Kubernetes perspective. Like you can't programmatically change the name of a resource because that'll cause like user confusion, right?
Right. So I feel that at least no value for now to be added into the Ratify, because we still need to do some like manual conversions.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, my major concern is still on the third manager, because we already have a third rotator, and now we need to have a third manager deployment or service, which just works for the commercial webhook.
Yeah. I would suggest we put this, we'll capture the investigation notes in the issue, and then we can put this in the future milestone until we have a real customer that we can work with to have a real conversion scenario. Like we may pull it back in. Akash, Luis, and Jungchen, do you have any feedback?
I think that makes sense. I think the only one is AKS image the image integrity folks. We should talk to them and see what their plan, if they were to bump, would be. It would be a reinstall? Would it be like conversion like required now? And if they don't have any concerns, I think it makes sense. We can just put this in the future and then decide later. That's my vote too.
Okay, I'll think with Shanghai on it. Yeah, and I'll also wait for the response from Certec on how Gatekeeper handles this case.
Yeah, I think I was just gonna add that. Yeah, let's chat with the Gatekeeper team. I think we just need to be in lockstep with whatever they're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure.
Thank you, Binbin. And the last agenda, in the last 10 minutes, I was hoping that we could set a date for the next milestone. So then, people visiting the repository, they can see when they would expect the next release. So we had our release cadence discussion last week, and where we thought is appropriate, like given that we want to go with a faster release, so that the customer can try out the latest bits, or having a way for them to like encourage them to try out the latest bits. We're going to be doing a minor release every 2 months. Luis, you weren't a part of that meeting. Do you have any feedback to a minor release every 2 months?
It does seem, I mean, it makes sense if we can try it a couple releases. I think my only concern here is it might bring release exhaustion for the main contributors to the project if we are like, if we don't provide like some sort of like in between weeks where we do maybe stabilization or like, because like I every 2 months seems like we would be doing 6 releases in a year. Seems a bit too much. So maybe we can have a conversation around maybe having a week or 2 in between for like just bug fixes or stabilization, or like just include some of the main like holiday for weeks there in Shanghai
Yeah.
and in the Americas.
Yeah, so given we released the actually Akash drives most of our releases, and Akash's opinion, he voted for more frequent releases. Is that right, Akash?
Yeah, my only consideration there was that I feel like if we have so many features and then we don't release frequently enough and we won't get any feedback. That's my only concern, if we don't get feedback fast enough.
I mean, we are in any case producing a developer build every week, right?
Yes, yep.
But we don't update the charts. So the
That's true.
discussion last week is like, even if we release alpha, beta, people are unlikely to pick it up until they see, oh, there's like a minor release, I'll go pick that up. But when they see an alpha or beta, they'll be like, I'll just wait. So the opinion was like, people are more likely to be picking up minor releases.
That's that.
And
I
if
mean,
you want to get feedback.
I understand. That makes sense to me. I just it feels to me like 6 releases in the year. It's a bit too much, but let's try it out. I mean, I'm all for like adjusting if we feel it's too much, or if we like, yeah, let's try it out. That's fine.
Yeah, I agree. Like we can always adjust and find what works for the Ratify crew.
Yeah, we can
So
just play
for
it by ear.
now, I think last time I went to the milestone from issues. Okay, milestones.
Yes.
And I just want to edit the name of this milestone, because we said we won't be doing, closer to the release, we'll evaluate if we had included lots of changes that we might want a RC for stabilization, but we won't be doing beta or alphas. So would the next release be like, do we just want to default to V1.1.0, or do we want to put in the cushion of like having RC? And if we don't need it, we can update it.
Let's just do V1.1.0, and if we need an RC, we can do that.
Yeah, sounds good. And 2 month. We last released end of September, and I just looked up the Thanksgiving dates. It's 28th of November this year. So September plus 2 months is actually
Thanksgiving is on the 28th.
Yeah, that's what I looked up. It says 2023 lands on 28. Can you confirm? Gosh.
Wait, I don't think that's right. I think it's the week before.
It's 23 and 24, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I was just reading weird information. So we don't want to be releasing before Thanksgiving, right? Like we want to, I think probably releasing after Thanksgiving is okay.
Yep. Yeah. I would say maybe like adding an extra week, just because some folks might take like maybe.
So should I put 1st of December or 8th of December?
I would say the 8th of December.
Okay, sounds good. So Okay, I have saved the milestone and since previously we've had more of like, we have 4 months for this release, and now we're having do a more frequent release, we might need to go through this list to take things out. But we don't have E and Feynman on the call today. Should we do that at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. I will add that to the agenda for next week then. Cool. Anything else? Juncheng, Akash, Binbin?
Not from my side.
I think we can leave this for next time, but we should have a discussion about cosine soon to see kind of like what work needs to be scoped out if we want to support that more fully. So
Is that in this release at the moment?
I don't think it's been triaged either, so likely not, but there might be some a lot more work required, like we discussed. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, should I add it to the agenda next week, Akash?
Yes, yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. And the current tracking issue is
I don't think we
where?
have, I don't think
Okay.
I don't think we have it right now. It kind of
Okay.
it kind of came a discussion point last week.
All right, I'll just add it to the agenda, like discuss cosine support.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. Hope you have a good, what days today? Wednesday and Thursday.
Thank you, Susan.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.